Our next guest brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Designed Whistler Golf Club. Off to an incredible start here in 2024. Amazing reviews, course conditions, service, reminding group organizers 12 or more. It is not too early to get your September and October buddy or corporate trips booked. Primetime's filling up fast. You, the group organizer, got 12 or more, you play for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/group. Groups. Here he is, John Shannon, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCowan podcast, the pride of Oliver, British Columbia, who sadly can't make it to the BC Hockey Hall of Fame this year. How you doing, Shannon?
Yeah, I'm disappointed that I'm not going to be in Penticton on Friday. It's always a great event. It has been part of my summers for, I was going to say 15 to 20 years now. So this is one of the few times I'm not there. I had pre-committed to an event in Summerside, Prince Edward Island before I knew the date of the Hall of Fame. Otherwise, I'd be on a plane this afternoon, getting ready to play Predator Ridge this afternoon. So
these are back-to-back really good classes. You were talking to us off line here about last year's class of Keith and Seabrook, and then Weber and Price. My goodness, the cup runneth over here. Back-to-back years.
You're right, Blake. And I'll tell you what, the thing that, and I know we've talked about this before, is that the amount of quality players that are constantly now coming out of the province, and yeah, certainly Seabrook and Keith and Price and Weber, who are the last two going in this year. And look at who the first picks overall the last 2 years are. Kids from the North Shore. I'm of a vintage older than you two guys when we could literally say there were two players in the National Hockey League that came out of the province of British Columbia. Two players. And now it's become a hockey hotbed for a lot of reasons, including the success of the BC Junior League that has become a springboard to go to the NCAA.
Yeah, it's a tough road now. It's a fractured road. It's a conversation for another day, but they're still finding their way to the NHL nevertheless, which is pretty amazing.
Well, I'll say this, John. When I first moved here 17 years ago, the thing that struck me about BC compared to Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, the provinces I was most familiar with, was facilities. Like, holy God, were there facilities in this province? Now, it's a little bit of a dated opinion because I'm not sure the facilities have kept
more rinks.
Certainly not in the city of Vancouver.
Right.
But of course, eastern provinces, for the most part, used to be able to count on a whole lot of outdoor skating.
Yeah.
Whereas David Suzuki will tell you, if Walter was racing Wayne right now in Brantford, there would not be that famous backyard rink, right? Because it's not cold enough.
I tell you what, we saw in my neighborhood. You bring up an interesting point. In my neighborhood, we have, and my kids are now in their 30s. We used to have two outdoor rinks that the neighbors would set up on public land, and one guy would maintain it, and every winter night, everybody would go and skate. Well, last 5 years they haven't been set up.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been set up at all here in Ontario. So it's and where I grew up, way down in the south in the Okanagan, we didn't even have an arena, and the ponds were frozen for 6 days. So that's where everybody played basketball in my hometown.
My home rink in Winnipeg was an outdoor.
Yeah,
rink. Home rink.
Blake played organized minor hockey at an outdoor rink. That's how old Blake Price is.
Yeah, there was only a couple indoor rinks that we played games at. For the most part, they were outdoor.
Yeah, well, and most of and Maddie, you might remember this. Most of the rinks in Metro Toronto, and even in Ottawa too, were outdoor rinks that they put roofs on and didn't insulate very well, and it was just as cold inside as it was out.
Yes.
No, I mean, there was a rink set up at my public school, boards and everything by the city. The dads, including Hockey Hall of Famer Roy McGregor on my block, used to go shovel off the basketball court and then borrow the hose from the fire department and flood it and maintain it late at night. That's why Roy's a Hockey Hall of Famer in my books. Those 11 p.m. calls to go get the fire hose and flood the rink. And John, like, there was never a question that our class wasn't going to go skating on the Rideau Canal at some point in January and February. And
I don't think they skated this year.
Yeah.
I don't think it was open.
No, I know. So, we're talking about all this as your city's nearly underwater today.
Yeah.
And as you look at the scenes in Chicago and some of these other towns with, everything blowing around,
Well,
patio
as I
blowing
told my
around.
neighbor Noah, that he's got his boat out in the front yard. So,
What did the Fat Lion say after its boat trip?
tell me.
Weather wasn't great. The buffet was terrific. Had 2 of everything.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's terrible.
Thank you.
we can edit that out though, can't we?
We're
Blake?
in the middle of July. If
Please.
it wasn't
Oh my gosh.
already clear. Elias Pettersson has done some speaking in Sweden. John, he talked about how it was good that the Canucks turned things around for the better last year. That he credits Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin for doing so, and saying he's looking forward to trying to get beyond the second round and into the conference final this year. How confident are you on Elias Pettersson regaining form here and looking like the player that we saw in the first half of last year and previous seasons after the tough finish last year?
Well, there's part of me that says, well, with the new contract, he better. That's the simple answer. But I suspect, and what you see constantly, guys, through the history of this game, is once a player gets a feel for what the postseason is like and the intensity it takes to play in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you want to do it again. And you want to be involved again. The fact that Pettersson was not 100% will probably drive him this year to be the player that we have envisioned for the last 2 or 3 years, particularly now that he's going to be a mainstay in the market for a long period of time. So I do expect him to have a great season. I do expect him to be, of equal value of JT Miller. And I think he needs to be in order to create some balance in the offense, which is something that I think they lacked in the playoffs, particularly in the series against Edmonton.
The playoff performance was really just the continuation, though, of the second half and really the final third that he had, though. To me, it's funny, and he hasn't really pushed back. He knows he didn't play well, but it's funny. It was his second most productive season ever, John, and it was an 89-point season that, most players in the NHL are dreaming of 89 points, even the good ones. That's a good year, and yet everybody is unanimous, and I think player included, you need to be better, which is just a funny claim to make against an 89-point player.
He's a 100-point player, though, Blake. Let's face it. He's a 100-point player. He has to be a 100-point player. It can't be, and we saw this particularly in the Nashville series. The team was as good as JT Miller willed it to be in the Nashville series. He was the impetus for everything. And part of that now has to fall on Pettersson. And so that they do need that extra push from the young Swede. I also think we forget all the time how young these guys are. Miller's a veteran now. Miller's an old man. Pettersson's still a kid. Pettersson's still young enough that, I'm still not convinced that he's filled out his body in so many ways, although I think he's lean and mean, and that's really the way he's going to play the game. But I do think that, the feel and the effect of playing in the postseason will drive him even more. And knowing full well with the new contract that there is an expectation of him, I think that he will be a huge factor and might be one of the top 10 players in the National Hockey League next year.
JT Miller at the same age was getting 47 points in 75 games.
Yeah. Is that the 13-goal year in Tampa?
That was the year before.
Okay.
Yeah.
We think DeBrusk is going to play with him. We noted that everybody knows he needed a winger, and Alvin mentioned DeBrusk. What about the other wing? Höglander is the holdover. Then you got Garland and Joshua, who were so good together on the third line, and then you got the new shooter in Danton Heinen, Langley's Danton Heinen. What do you think? Who do you think you'd put on the other side with Pettersson and DeBrusk?
Is there another option?
Pius Suter?
No, or maybe between now and September 17th, when they're in Penticton for camp, there's somebody else showing up.
Maybe Jonathan Lekremacki, the first rounder from a couple of years ago. Maybe Vasily Podkolzin has such a great camp that they try there. I don't know. But is your answer that you're not yet convinced on that line, John? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not convinced on one of the wingers. As you know, I mean, I'd love it to be Höglander. I really would. And you know what he showed second half, some signs of brilliance, but then there was inconsistencies that drove the coaches nuts, drove them nuts. So, you know, in my heart, you know, you'd say Höglander, but your head says, gosh, and I'm sure that this is the conversation in the building is, you know, when you got the big whiteboard and you got Rick's list of who's going to play with whom at this point, you know, I think they got to hope that, you know, either somebody comes out of nowhere or maybe they can go and find someone. And because here's the other thing, you talked about Garland and Joshua. I'm not changing a darn thing with Bluger in the middle. I am not changing a darn thing.
You mentioned that to us before. Yeah.
That was, to me, that ended up being the best third line in the game. I think the guys in Winnipeg might argue with me that they had one with Adam Lowry's line, but I think that what Bluger, Joshua, and Garland did, to me, was something that I just don't think you touch that. And I think that might be the only one that's in real ink on the board for Rick Tocchet and his staff.
It's a crazy thing to say, but I agree that might be the best way to have a full-fledged actual third line, because you're relying on the extra je ne sais quoi of that line and why that line works to propel it. Otherwise, if you take one of those pieces out and it just deflates to the resumes, I don't know that that's a good enough third line for you. You need some production out of that third line, and for whatever reason, those three guys work together. And with no Elias Lindholm there, I mean, you need something out of that third group, don't you?
Yeah, but I think that I also think that we really get pigeonholed into saying, well, there's a third line, there's a second line. You know, with what Bluger and Joshua and Garland did was that they became so versatile for the Canucks that Tocchet could throw them into any situation in any scenario. So, you know, rather than calling them 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, just say it's the Bluger line, and knowing full well that some nights they're going to play 14 minutes and other nights they're going to play close to 20, and understand that it's going to be dictated by the quality and the style of play against the opposition.
Moving along, Mr. Shannon, because we're a week and a half away from the Paris Olympics. We got an item coming up on the show on Summer McIntosh, the swimmer. Of course, the Canadian women's soccer team will be defending Olympic gold. We have DeGrasse in the sprinting, and of course, we have that basketball team ready to take a step up. As I just
we have 3 basketball teams.
Yes, indeed. But we have a men's team that may very well be in a gold medal match against the USA, one of the best rep teams the world over. So
I think the Serbs and the French might have something to say about that.
Yeah, well, bring on the Serbs and French. We're ready for the Serbs and French finally. No, but just my question's on going into these games, and of course we're a winter games nation more often than not. I see a lot of fantastic storylines here. I see some winning available, and I'm just wondering if this has the chance to be one of, if not the biggest, Summer Olympic Games for Canada in terms of interest coast to coast. You know, given that it's bigger sports and bigger name athletes, and you know, all the potential star power here with this Canadian Olympic team.
How much hype has there really been, Matt?
Not a ton. I gotta say, not a ton.
We've been distracted by other things. And it's
the Copa for sure. Yeah, I mean, like the Copa has been a big distraction here the last few
because of the success. If Canada gets grouped and they're out early, then I don't think it's so much of it. But we got swept up in it, so
I think we got swept up. I mean, and you may laugh. I know Vancouver hockey fans will laugh, but you also got swept up in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That otherwise we might have been talking more about, particularly somebody like Summer McIntosh, who, let's face it, I think is a better swimmer than Katie Ledecky, and they call Katie Ledecky the greatest swimmer in American history. So we've got a chance in the pool. We certainly have lots of chances at athletics. You know, I think we have 2 hammer throwers with world championship pedigree. You know, this is a really neat opportunity in a background of a city that is dying to show itself off. and the French have been trying to figure it out and how to get through it. We're still going to have some controversy, which is now always the case
swimming in the Seine. Swimming in the Seine is quite a choice by them. Yeah, my goodness,
there are a few things that you wonder, Lake, that are going to be. The one thing I wonder too, and we actually had Scott Russell on our show last week. I wondered if the basketball team is so successful, and they have a chance to be successful, does it overshadow all of the other stories? Do we get swept up by it? And I hope, as much as I'm thrilled that we're putting a really quality team on the court, I hope we don't get swept up just in basketball.
No, there's enough programming there to go
I
around.
don't think so. I think Summer and DeGrasse, and some of the individuals on top of women's soccer. Yeah, no,
I hope you're right.
There's space.
You're right.
I'm sorry. Swimming in the Seine?
Yeah, there's
two events,
two swimming events in the Seine.
For the triathletes. The triathletes were supposed to.
The triathletes, I get it.
Marathon swim too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I thought you meant the actual swimming events.
No,
in the Seine. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me.
No, but I wouldn't dip my toe in the Seine, much less put my body in the Seine. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
The triathletes are accustomed to competing in some
pretty mucky water.
Hostile. Yeah.
Honestly,
I've talked to Whitfield and others in the past who said, some of the events in Europe, you're swimming in a river and like along comes a dead animal carcass. So the triathletes are pretty tough and accustomed to that. The marathon swim. So that means they're exposed to the Seine for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Is this what I'm
Not
hearing?
loving that. Not loving that.
Hey, listen, a long period of time might be more than 10 seconds, boys. Come on now.
Yeah. Honestly.
Beach volleyball in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower.
Hey, I saw that. I saw that venue this morning. It looks pretty cool.
Looks gorgeous, actually.
Yeah. And then surfing in the South Pacific. What could be more Parisian?
Well, that's that more and more that's going to happen with Olympics. Is that Vancouver spoiled everybody. Vancouver, if you recall, guys, was the most compact Olympics in history.
Yeah.
When you talk about distances from the furthest venue, I think LA in 28. I think they're going to be playing things. I think we're playing baseball in Kansas City.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
and I'm not sure that's the Olympics anymore for me, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. When you start farming out events half a world or half a country away, I'm not necessarily sure.
The motivation for a lot of these things is, why are we going to build a brand new facility that's going to get ignored immediately when it's done? And that was the softball. Was that a consideration for LA? Was there's a really good facility right here? We'd have to build it. Let's just use the really good facility. So, in some ways it's what we've been calling for. So,
or we talk about, building four different sets of cities that, rotate the Olympics.
Right.
We
talked about
that
before
too. I think that's inevitable, but we've been saying that since 1968.
It's true.
Really,
it's true. But here's the thing.
Blake wasn't born in 68, Matt, but that's okay.
That's hey. But that rink in Winnipeg sure was. If we're going to semi-permanent or a rota of Winter Olympic hosts, I would love it if Vancouver is in there.
It'd make a lot of sense.
It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, Whistler Blackcomb will be amongst the last places on Earth to ski, so you might as well hunker down there.
No, but the other thing is, people like coming here.
And
as John said, it was a compact games in a big city.
Sure.
Like, you're not out in the Swiss countryside. You're in a big metropolis with all sorts of amenities that people want to experience. I memean, tourism is the thing here. We see it every day here.
Yeah.
At the Wall Center.
Well, that's why in 32 they're going back to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And then they're not going to have to build too many venues, including the new venue for the hockey team.
So Jen, just last question here. Do you expect these games will be a pretty good ratings wise for the CBC?
I think it will take time. I think that I don't think there's very much momentum right now. I mean, you don't go to the local Starbucks and people say, "Wow, I'm hardly wait for the Olympics to start." I don't think people know yet, and I don't know why.
Well, I think the rings have lost their
they-
luster.
They released their announcers yesterday, the CBC. I just haven't seen the bigger promotional push.
Well,
from the CBC.
and one of the key things is that how many people watch the CBC to watch promotion now?
Yeah,
I mean, the CBC's ratings across the board are down, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And sports fans are watching Sportsnet and TSN.
That's right.
And they don't, even though they're going to carry some of the CBC coverage, they haven't really promoted the Olympics very much at this point because they've been promoting some of their own stuff.
Right. When you cut back, you have fewer people and fewer dollars available.
I think there's a little bit of guilt about.
I'm excited.
I think there's a little bit of guilt about watching the Olympics. I think people eventually let the stories hook them in. But I think before the games begin, people take a political stance on it and go, it's too much.
Well,
I think you're right.
IOC is a 4-letter word. And then, of course, when you go back to Beijing for a second time, because they'll just do whatever they have to do. They have the people power to throw at it. And, of course, the aerials take place with a
nuclear reactor.
Nuclear power plants as the backdrop.
I don't think it was. It looked like one, but I don't think it was.
It's kind of post-apocalyptic.
Wow, that was a strange. I was involved.
How do they
in those
let that
games.
happen, Shannon? You're in TV, like the first TV person who saw that should
Make
have
it look
said,
good.
"No, we can't orient the skiing aerials in front of the nuclear plant. Like that can't be."
That was a strange one. There's no question. There was maybe they were selling it as real estate. Who knows? You know.
Great chat. Thanks for this, John. Have a good week. Enjoy PEI. We'll catch up next week.
Thank you. And to everybody going to Penticton, have a great time. It's one of the special weekends of the year in the province.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekerson Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.